Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this midweek Hebrew word study in the book of Ruth. It's a gorgeous day today, and yesterday was beautiful. And hope you truly get to be outside and enjoy a little bit of it for changes. And we know it's going to get colder again, but just enjoy this gift of a really nice day. So make this lesson just a little bit shorter today. We are finishing up the book of Ruth, chapter 2, and verses 21 through 23 will conclude this chapter. And again, we're looking at Ruth from the standpoint of her relationship that's being built and that's growing with her future husband, Boaz. And now she comes home. Remember, she was gleaning in the field, carried a large amount of barley with her, comes back home, and she's got this exchange of verbiage with her mother-in-law, Naomi. And again, obviously, they spoke a lot more than what's recorded here. We have some of it, and of course, we only have what we have because it's thought to be relevant for our needs. Obviously, things were written down based upon what we needed to know and what would provide us with as I look at it from the spiritual side, a way to draw closer to God and to be instructed in His Word. So, these next couple verses, it's almost challenging to try to find something that fits along those lines. You think, okay, why was this put here? What's the purpose of it? And that's what I kind of stop when I come across verses that I would typically kind of motor through and say, well, it doesn't seem to have any relevance to me. We know there's always something. And so, one little tidbit I'm going to point out here is how the Jewish sages handled finding some verses that didn't seem to align with one another. And what we are going to look at here is a good example of that. So, as we read through verse 21, Ruth said, and it calls her the Moabite. This is significant because it kind of spoke about her heritage in the ancestry in the beginning, and then it kind of dropped it. And remember, to be a Moabite was a derogatory thing, a defaming thing. And so here, for the Bible to mention that it assigns her or aligns her with the thought of a Moabite again, causes the sages some notice. So it says, and Ruth the Moabite, all the more so in that he said to me, um, be with the workers, that you should stay close. Of course, translating from Hebrew into English, you can see how challenging that is, that you have to add many more words in English to make it flow and rhyme and work out to make sense, which Hebrew you don't need. But what I want to point out is this word here, I'm going to kind of circle it in yellow, is translated as workers. It's Nahaarim, and you read through this as it's in this Jewish version of the Book of Ruth, created by Samson Raphael Hirsch, a very renowned commentator. Um, you would just pass over it. But let's look back at the Hebrew itself in the interlinear. And so we see the same words. And Ruth the Moabitess also said, he said to me, stay by the young men. This word, hanerim, is a masculine word. All Hebrew words have gender to them. They're either masculine or they're feminine. Other languages, such as German, would have a neuter. Um, English has words that you aren't assigning gender to, so this is somewhat unfamiliar to us. But in Hebrew, everything is either masculine or feminine, and that gives you insight and it tells you who's being spoken to. And so here they translate this as young men. Well, of course, Samson Raphael Hirsch, when he wrote this and translated it, workers, he knew what it said because one of the first things they start discussing down here is why did he say young men when earlier in verse 8 he tells them to stay close to the female workers. And we're going to just jump back to verse 8 and take a look at that. And here Boaz is saying, stay close to the Na'aroi, Na'arotai, the servant girls. So it has the same basic root word for servant, but the ending is a feminine plural. And of course, so here starts the fun. Here starts the commentator saying, well, why did Ruth speak that way? And what's so interesting here is they can't agree, but yet the interesting part is that it records the discrepancy. So he says there's this discrepancy in Boaz's actual words and Ruth's um, version. So Boaz says, stay by my female workers. Ruth says, stay close to the young men. And so they give you various interpretations rather than just say, well, here's the way it is. They will point out both sides and let the reader make a choice. Again, that's the nuance of Hebrew versus maybe what we're used to in Christianity. Judaism keeps everything kind of out there and lets you debate, and they feel it's more worthwhile and encourages growth to be able to debate and, in their terms, argue through many of these to, because at least it shows that you care and that you're studying and you'll learn something from it, even if you don't come to an agreement. So here is what they talk about. Some of them mention that when the scripture referred to her as a Moabite, it's meant to rebuke her and be derogatory. They're saying, well, maybe she didn't know the language very well, and maybe she misunderstood, or maybe she spoke inappropriately, didn't know the masculine and feminine forms. Um, that maybe the Moabite language, like English, didn't have the masculine and feminine forms. So they're kind of giving her a escape route here, saying, well, maybe she just didn't know what she was saying. Um, Otherwise, sometimes they even said, oh no, she was a Moabite and she just didn't know what she was doing. And they said later on, we'll see that in one of the next verses, Naomi corrects her. Here is a rabbi called Rav Alka-Bates feels that Ruth just simply used the general term of Ne'arim as a general term for workers without making any distinction between male and female, which is what the previous version that we read from the Hirsch commentary followed along that same lines. Then there's another one, just going into Ruth becoming aware of the new customs and cultures. And there's just a fun reading here of how they pick up on just this small portion of the verses and go and highlight them and try to find reasoning and try to discuss them and so forth. And it goes on for a whole page just upon this one episode here. And I find that really, really fascinating. And so let's look ahead to um, we finished the verse 21 here, that you should stay close by the workers until the end of the harvest. And we go to verse 22, and here comes Naomi going back in again. And of course, she pretty much reiterates what Ruth had said, but here she goes and highlights the same word of the female workers. And again, the whole purpose of this was that um, Boaz was trying to protect Ruth. We know that's the whole underlying story here, that he wanted the young men to stay away from her, and he wanted her to stay with the female workers so that she wouldn't be lonely, she could be encouraged. She was in a group, so she would be safe and not possibly fall prey to inappropriate attentions. And it says that she stayed close to the female workers. So again, it's just interesting. This seemingly innocent or um, having some scripture that doesn't really uh, appeal to us at first, or may not say much, but in the Hebrew, jumps out and causes just so much discussion and takes notice because why did Ruth speak that way? Why did Naomi kind of straighten her out? And so we look at some little more commentation here on verse 22, commentators, and it says, notice how Naomi had a motherly response in contrasting the use of daughter and daughter-in-law. So let's look at that. Back at that, it says that here Ruth was her daughter-in-law, but here when Naomi speaks to her, she says, "My daughter." And so again, just creating this relationship, letting you see in some detail that's maybe not so apparent in the English, just how close they were and how Naomi was really trying to help Ruth through this because she seemed to know what was happening here. She knew the circumstances. She saw that this was, God's hand working in this. And so, of course, she says, don't go to anybody else's field. Stay there and glean there until the end of the barley harvest. And numerous rabbis pick up on this, um, even filling in her words saying, Naomi's already talking about a marriage proposal coming, and she sees this and feel this is all working. Um, it's just really, really interesting. And of course, reiterates about not being mistreated. Boaz cautioned his men to stay away from her and not molest her. Quite strong words, not molest her. And so Ruth was safe in the fields and, really give her the benefit of the doubt here. And then to close out the chapter, it says most commentators feel that she spent the entire harvest period with Boaz's female workers and maybe even didn't come back to Naomi. So that's really, really interesting. You would think she would have gone home every night, but maybe the fields were farther away. Maybe, this just wasn't practical. But this is quite interesting. Here it even says that um, now that she didn't sleep away from Naomi for the duration of the harvest. So you have two very contrasting opinions here that just make you think. Who is right, who is wrong, we really don't know. We just know that there's a relationship building. And I think that's the important part of staying in that mindset and realizing that, we have the ability to look at these verses in their original languages and to see that there is, of course, something lost in translation. And there's a deeper, richer meaning to be found in the original language. What does it mean for us in the long term? Well, for some people, it may not mean anything. You may just say, well, hey, the end result is still the same. But for others may say, wow, I have something I want to investigate. Maybe for you, like it did for me, it was kind of a prompting to um, get myself a little more familiar with this and to be able to sift and navigate through this. And that again is what I love to just help encourage and realize that we have all these wonderful tools at our disposal. You don't have to go away to a language school or a Bible college. You can immerse yourself in this little bits and little pieces at a time and use these wonderful programs to do searching, clicking on words and just spending a whole time just looking at these words and looking what they mean. Even like the one here for stay close. Um, that seems like a strange word. We open it up and we find it's the word "bach," which is the word for cleave or to cling. Where do we commonly associate cleaving and clinging with the book of Genesis, of a husband cleaving to his wife? So here is this word that you wouldn't get from the English translation, but you see the deeper meaning of staying close, of cleaving, of clinging. You can go down here and see where the word came from, that it even has some Arabic, has some Aramaic history to it, and it just has these meanings that help enhance what is happening here with Ruth with Boaz, with this relationship that's being built here. And again, this is where I'm totally fascinated and enamored with this, and hopefully I can pass along some of that enthusiasm to you guys. So I hope you're blessed by this. I hope you're encouraged. Hope you have a wonderful day and look forward to having you come back next week as we go into chapter 3 and see this relationship and romance really jump to a new level in some ways, surprising ways for the times. So, all right, God bless you and see you then. Bye bye.